What if I told you that Göbekli Tepe, the site that already rewrote the human story, may not be the oldest of its kind? What if I told you that archaeologists have discovered not one, but at least 2 sites in southeastern Turkey that likely predate Göbekli Tepe? Mendik Tepe and Çakmaktepe, located just a few kilometers from each other, are about to change what we know about the origins of the Neolithic in southeastern Anatolia, and may even have the potential to help us understand how Göbekli Tepe came to be. I'm Madam Archaeologist, your go-to informant on everything archaeology, and in this episode, I want to introduce you to the fascinating archaeological sites of Mendik Tepe and Çakmaktepe, specifically the excavation work that has taken place so far, what we're still waiting for, and the importance these sites hold for understanding of the transition from mobile foraging lifestyles to more sedentary ways of life. Before discussing the work at Mendik Tepe and Çakmaktepe, for those of you who are not as familiar with Göbekli Tepe, it's an astounding archaeological site in southeastern Turkey, near the city of Şanlıurfa, known for its stone enclosures featuring these T-shaped pillars that boast a variety of intriguing symbols and figures, mainly animals. Excavations at the site started in the 1990s under the direction of the archaeologist Klaus Schmidt. At least 6 enclosures labeled A to F in their order of discovery have been unearthed at the site. Enclosures A to D are the largest of these and actually belong to the oldest layer, Layer 3, and they've been dated to the 10th millennium BC. Radiocarbon dates published so far suggest that they were not built at the same time, and that they were perhaps not all backfilled at the same time either. One of the things that has added to the fascination is that these elaborate enclosures A to D seem to have been deliberately buried upon their abandonment, although this is being reassessed at the moment. The fill could have resulted from partial deliberate burial mixed with other processes. Unfortunately, the radiocarbon date ranges are quite broad and we can't establish an exact sequence of events until more dating work gets done. For now, we can say that the enclosures most likely weren't built at the same time, and they were probably also abandoned at different times too. Also, the dates for the enclosures fall into a broader period termed the Pre-Pottery Neolithic A, abbreviated the PPNA, the time when people in the region were starting to transition from mobile foraging to more sedentary ways of life. Under Klaus Schmidt's direction, no obvious dwellings were discovered to suggest that Göbekli Tepe served as a settlement. Just these monumental enclosures that, with no obvious domestic purpose, were interpreted as carrying a religious or cultic significance. Göbekli Tepe, as a result, was dubbed the world's first temple. However, more recent excavations have revealed domestic structures that were in use during both the PPNA and succeeding PPNB period. So it looks like the site served more than just a cultic purpose. Over the decades, more sites with similar characteristics have been excavated, and it has become clear that Göbekli Tepe is part of a wider collection of Neolithic sites within its landscape, which have been termed Taş Tepeler sites. And, most notably, archaeologists are finding sites that they have reason to believe are older than Göbekli Tepe, and ongoing excavations at these sites will provide us with very valuable information on the origins of the Taş Tepeler phenomenon and the development of the early Neolithic in the region. One such older site is Mendik Tepe. Mendik Tepe is located 15 kilometers southwest of Şanlıurfa and covers an area of approximately 2 hectares. It's in the process of being excavated under the direction of Professor Douglas Baird as part of the wider Taş Tepeler project. According to a preliminary report, recent survey and excavation suggested that Mendik Tepe was occupied during the pre-Pottery Neolithic A and possibly even earlier, at the end of the Epipaleolithic, or roughly 10,000 to 9,000 BC. Surface finds include stone tools from the PPNA, as well as a few microliths that could be from the late Epipaleolithic or beginning of the PPNA, so the site likely dates to the 10th millennium BC, or the very beginning of the Neolithic, the time when people were transitioning from mobile foragers to becoming more settled communities. Archaeologists have found several structures at the site, and working out what the functions of the structures were is one of the key questions under investigation right now. They vary in size, some are smaller, about 2 to 3 meters in diameter, while others are 4 or 5 meters, and others are even bigger. And just as the structures vary in size, they also varied in function. At the moment, the medium-sized buildings are thought to have functioned primarily as residential structures or dwellings. The smaller ones were used perhaps for storage or semi-specialized purposes like food preparation. And the biggest structures may have been ritual or communal areas, or larger houses. These are hypotheses, and the question of function is one that is still being explored. But it is fascinating to see a range of structures present at the site. We are starting to see that combinations of residential and communal or ritual structures were an important feature of early Neolithic sites in the region. One of the excavated small structures, labeled Structure 1, has an external diameter of 3 meters and features these standing stones in the wall construction. These upright stones formed the bottom of the superstructure, while the stones that formed the rest of the building became structural debris. The floor boasted circular features that are likely post holes. Some of these posts could have supported a roof, although some could have served other functions. The preliminary report tells us that some substantially more elaborate buildings are present associated with pillars in a perhaps early manifestation of the more dramatic corporate buildings of sites like Göbekli and Karahan Tepe. End quote. Now, the pillars at Mendik Tepe, we are told, are smaller and are not T-shaped like those seen at Göbekli Tepe. But this is precisely what makes them stand out to me, because as we saw written in the preliminary report, they could have been a precursor to the T-shaped pillars placed at Göbekli Tepe. You start small and then make your way to larger projects. There's another site nearby called Çakmaktepe, and it is thought to be older than Göbekli Tepe as well. It is only about 5 kilometers away from Mendik Tepe, and the two sites are broadly contemporaneous, with archaeologists thinking that Çakmaktepe dates to the beginning of the PPNA period as well, or around 10,000 to 9,500 BC, based on the finds. It has been under excavation for a bit longer than Mendik Tepe has, under the direction of Associate Professor Fatma Şahin, and so we have some more information on this site. Structures have been found here, and like those at Mendik Tepe, they seem to have varied in function, with residential buildings being one such purpose. One different structure, though, labeled Structure 10, was about 16 meters in diameter, featured post holes inside, and, interestingly, bears evidence of having been deliberately backfilled. According to tashstepeler.org, it appears that this special or communal building was intentionally filled in a short period of time rather than by a natural process. The presence of neatly placed rows of stones in some places among the fill stones indicates that this building was not filled randomly, but was carefully backfilled in a more controlled manner. End quote. Since backfilling has been noted at Göbekli Tepe as well, the deliberate burial of structures may have been a more widespread phenomenon among Taş Tepeler sites, and why people were doing it merits further investigation. I also want to note that the backfilling of Structure 10 at Çakmaktepe does not mark the end of occupation at the site. There is evidence suggesting that other structures were constructed after the abandonment of Structure 10. Another interesting finding at Çakmaktepe includes fragments of pillars, and like those at Mendik Tepe, they are not as elaborate as the pillars we see at Göbekli Tepe. These pillars may have been prototypes for the T-shaped pillars, as they are simpler, they're eye-shaped, and they lack the decoration and imagery seen on the T-shaped pillars at Göbekli Tepe. As for small finds, archaeologists have recovered stone tools, as well as vessels and ornaments made from stone, alongside ground stones and grinding slabs that suggest that wild cereals were processed at Çakmaktepe, and archaeobotanical finds support this. Wild animal bones have been found as well, and, paired with this artifact that is thought to depict an antelope hunting scene, suggests that hunting still played an important part in the lives of Çakmaktepe's residents. I find this artifact particularly interesting because it seems like an early manifestation of the practice of recording animals in stone that would become more elaborate over time, eventually leading to the images and carvings we see at Göbekli Tepe and other Taş Tepeler sites. It's also possible that images were drawn on wooden posts at Çakmaktepe. These posts, for which our only evidence of their former existence is these post holes, may not have been merely structural. They could have housed some of the earliest works of Neolithic art in southeastern Turkey. Unfortunately, the posts themselves don't survive for us to test this hypothesis. But thankfully, this little stone artifact does, and it may be the beginning of a practice that would eventually develop into this. It is also interesting that this so-called special building at Çakmaktepe and others at the site are roughly circular. This could also be a precursor to the famous circular enclosures we see at Göbekli Tepe. Mendik Tepe and Çakmaktepe are helping us write an important chapter in the human story. They are adding fresh insights into our understanding of the origins and development of the Taş Tepeler phenomenon, and they will contribute tremendously to our knowledge of how the early Neolithic period in southeastern Turkey began and developed. We are still awaiting scientific dating to confirm the proposed dates for the sites, but based on the stone tools, there is no reason to heavily doubt that Mendik Tepe and Çakmaktepe fall within the earlier end of the Taş Tepeler timeline. I am also awaiting publications on the analysis of finds from Mendik Tepe to learn things like whether the site was occupied all year long, or if its inhabitants used it during a specific season or seasons. I'm also excited for the results of newer and future excavation and dating work at Göbekli Tepe, because I want to find out whether there are any domestic structures there that are contemporaneous with Mendik Tepe and Çakmaktepe, or if all the structures at Göbekli Tepe, domestic and not, are younger and thus perhaps successors of the structures we see at Mendik and Çakmaktepe. Göbekli Tepe might be the most famous Taş Tepeler site, but Mendik Tepe and Çakmaktepe are just as important because, as I've mentioned already, they are crucial for furthering our understanding of the Neolithic transition, and, if proven older beyond doubt, they will also be able to help us unravel how Göbekli Tepe came to be Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe didn't just emerge overnight. It's becoming clear that there were a series of indigenous developments that took place within the wider region over time, involving experiments with stone architecture, increased sedentism, and combining residential and communal or ritual structures within settlements. Çakmaktepe and Mendik Tepe will also help us to better understand why people chose to give up their mobile forager lifestyles and organize themselves into settled communities instead. I, for one, am very excited to find out what else is discovered at Mendik Tepe and Çakmaktepe, and will keep you updated on the progress at these sites. Once official publications have rolled out for Mendik Tepe, I will post a follow-up video, so make sure you have subscribed and also consider following me on X. My handle is @MadamarchEO. As usual, if you have any thoughts, feel free to leave a comment. Subscribe for more cool content by your go-to informant on everything archaeology, Madam Archaeologist.